all my Olympic dreams are over. All those things were crushing on me, and I was thinking deeply about them. I had a general, 4-star general, Gordon Sullivan, chief of staff of the Army at the time. He was one of my first calls that came in because it was a pretty high profile injury. Asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him, "Sir, I have no idea. I just, I'm trying to understand what's going on. But I'll tell you what, I'll call you back." So I'm telling this 4-star, this corporal, tell this 4-star, let me get you on my calendar, and I'll call you back. That's the state I was in. I wound up doing that. But my wife, she said, we're going to get through this time together. It's just our new normal. When she spoke those words, she made me understand with just those words that life really hadn't changed that much. Still had my family, still had my faculty, still had my degree from the University of Arkansas. I still had dreams, goals, aspirations. The only thing that was different was I was now missing a leg. And so at that moment, I began thinking about how that could I advance? How could I amplify the life I now have? Do I think about the 99% of things that I cannot do? Or do I think about the 1% of things I can't do and the 99% of things I still can do?
My name is Thad David. I'm a former Marine Recon Scout sniper with 2 deployments to Iraq. As a civilian, I've now facilitated hundreds of personal and professional development trainings across the country. And it struck me recently that the same things that help civilians will also help veterans succeed in their new roles as well. Join me as we define civilian success principles to inspire veteran victories. Welcome to another episode. I'm here today with a very, very special guest. He is a 4-time All-American, a 2-time with the Olympic trials, 2-time 2-sport Paralympian, and a silver medalist, as well as a combat veteran, John Register. How are you doing, John?
Thad, I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me on the show. I can't wait to hear the questions and get into this conversation for your guests that you have listening in.
Man, I'm so excited to have you on. You've got just so many things that you've done and that you continue to do, and I'm excited to jump in. So thank you. One thing I always love to ask people right away is just knowing that you are a veteran, and this is a show to help out and empower veterans. Real quick, what got you to join the military?
That's a great question. I had just finished up the University of Arkansas. I just graduated with a degree in communications. I had a baby on the way with my wife, Alice, soon to be wife Alice, and I had no job. And so I was like, what do I do? And I still wanted to run track and field. So I wound up finding that the United States Army has a world-class athlete program. This world-class athlete program allows a soldier athlete to train a couple of years prior to the next Olympic Games if you are bona fide or validated by your national governing body of sport. And because I went to the Olympic trials, I figured my national governing body or USA Track and Field would validate for me, which they did. So I went into the Army to A, run track and field, and B, to have my kid delivered for free. So that's my way to get in.
I love how we're all so similar in the kind of why we joined is as some form of I needed blank, and so this was it. Well, that's incredible. So you joined in, and what did you end up doing in the Army?
Well, I want to kind of just caveat, because I think what happens is there's a time that we find what our service actually means for each one of us individually. And that time for me was crossing the parade field. I was an enlisted guy, and I didn't know if I wanted to stay in or not. And as I walked across the parade field, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, I began to have this nostalgia of all the people, all the soldiers, men and women who had walked this parade field before me to protect the freedoms of the United States of America. And I got it. That's when it hit me. It sunk into me. But I also went a little further than that, right? Because when someone will always ask or say, thank you for your service. And so I take this as a learning point, and you'll hear this all throughout our conversation today, because I think it's important for us to remember what the service is that we were fighting for, or because that fighting is a byproduct of why we all signed up. We all raised our hand to protect and defend the United States Constitution. against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that we would bear true faith and allegiance to the same, right? And so when people come and thank us for our service, that's the oath that we took. So then I asked the next question: when's the last time you read our United States Constitution? What does the preamble say? Why does it start off, "We the people of the United States"? What are the 7 articles of the Constitution? Why is article number 5 the most important article that was written? And then when we come into the amendments of the Constitution, why is that important for me? I identify as a Black American because when the Constitution was written, I was only 3/5 of a human being. So for me to sign up, walking across the parade field, a part of this history that I wasn't even 3/5 of a person, I have the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments that begins my journey. And so that is, I think, what we have to understand, that the folks that put that Constitution together knew, tried to protect, ensured that we could not dismantle it very easily, this democracy that we're trying to make work, because we didn't want a dictatorship, King George, over us like other countries had, right? So we put them into the legislative branch. We put it into the executive branch, and we put it into the judicial branch to ensure there was a distributed power of government. And we've gotten away from understanding what that actually means and why it was done in such fashion. So I think that's the other answer of my deepening and understanding, what my service actually meant.
I love, you can just, your passion that exudes out once you started talking about it. You can tell this is something you do often. You talk to people about often. You said you ask them when's the last time, and you said you feel like we've gotten away from it. Why do you think we've gotten away from it? And what does that look like?
I think we're trying to use it as it was not intended. So we want to pick out a little piece here and pick out a little piece here to drive agendas and try to separate or try to make one part of the government more powerful than another part. So when I was building, we'll get into this, the Paralympic military sport program, I got a unique vantage point to have been through 4 presidencies and been to the White House 4 times and have seen how our power structure changes from hand to hand. Every president writing a note for the next president. Well, until the last one.
Yeah.
But it was an honoring thing that started with George Washington, that said, I'm not going to stay. That is incredible to me when you look back in history of everybody, the Mussolinis out there, the Hitlers that are out there, everybody that wanted to be a dictator. And what we have done is we've split based upon what we think that document actually means, and no one has read it.
I love that you do that. My mother-in-law actually carries around, she carries around little mini documents, and she actually hands them out to people. And it's like, when was the last time that you read this? You should check it out. When was the last time?
On our phone, it's easy. I mean, you can download it. It's not a very long document to read, but I think it's important, right? When we start talking about, it's for veterans, and this show is directed at veterans. It's important not to get to the sound bites that one group or another group can make, because we're into these short sound bites now, and really it's our own personal work that we must do to understand why do we exist differently than most of the rest of the world.
I love that. And as all things, it comes back to the work that we're putting in, or that we have to put in. Should we take it on?
Yeah. So I'm off my soapbox now. Let's go. We can get it.
No, I was fascinated. That's what I love about these conversations. I never know which way it's going to go, and what a powerful starting point. I mean, at its core, that's why we all signed up, and what we all signed up to protect.
Right.
So it's fascinating. And so you mentioned also, one thing as I think back to introducing you, and then you joined up, obviously, to be an athlete, to have a baby for free. And you are a combat veteran, and so what was that? I'm very fascinated to get into everything you've done as Olympic trials for just everything you've done there. But what was that like joining in? Because I would imagine there's a story in there that you joined up to be an athlete and somehow ended up in a combat role overseas.
Yeah, because we all do the needs of the Army or whatever branch of service that they were
Mm-hmm.
in.
Yep.
And even though you're signed up for one thing, and there was no guarantee. Let me be very clear. Right now, you can actually sign up for the Army's World Class Athlete Program. It's something that I can help to continue to work on. But when I was going through and the other athletes that were with me, there was no guarantee that you were actually going to get placed in this program. So I, fortunately, after basic training and advanced individual training, AIT, I had 3 days and I wound up getting selected for all Army track and field camp. And I went out there, was great. And from there was selected for the Army's World Class Athlete Program. At this time, I loved the military. I said, this is the best thing since sliced bread, baby. And I wanted to be a lifer. I'd already told my wife I wanted to be a lifer. So I took the officer selection battery test, scored off the charts, was great. So I kept that in my back pocket. Let me do my track and field stuff. And after I get out, I'll go to OCS, down in Fort Benning, School for Girls and Boys, and I will be a military officer, and I'll do another 20 years, get out, work for a contractor for another 20 years. I got my whole life set, right? That was my vision. Then I get to my first leadership course, which is called something different now, but it's called Primary Leadership Development Course, PLDC. And I'm 2 weeks in, trying to make my rank, and they do a drill, and the drill, our instructors do this drill, and the drill is on what you must do if you get deployed. How do you make sure that you get your dental records done? You have to get all the stuff we have to do for preparing your families. So after we finish that exercise, we come back into the room, and I'm held outside the room, and my instructor says to me, for everybody else that's going back in the room, that was an exercise. For you, this is real. You've just been assigned to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, 6th to 27th Field Artillery, and you are headed to Operation Desert Shield. And I was like, what? Excuse me? And I was kind of numb at that point. When I left and went back to the barracks, my buddy was with me, and we were talking about it. He said, when you get back, you're going to be able to do this. And I said, yeah, if I come back. And when I said if, that gravity of I might not come back washed over me like it was like a wet, big wave that just pushes you under, right? It's not letting you up. That's what that press was like. And I saw my wife, she was coming to meet me for lunch, and I just even couldn't get it out. Just started bawling, started crying. I mean, I couldn't believe this was happening. And what snapped me out of it was I was on the plane ride over to Fort Sill, and it was actually, I believe, I heard a voice just speak, I believe it's the voice of God, Holy Spirit, whoever I want to say, this is just an answer to your prayer. A prayer I had about seeing my fruit. I want to say, hey, I want to see my fruit, and 3 times God had told me, nah, don't worry about it. You got it. And this was an answer to that. So going over there was this whole big answer. And I wound up having this amazing time that was very unique. So I got myself a kitabi. Kitabi is Arabic for book. The I on the end makes it possessive, means my book, kitabi. So I'm trying to learn a little bit Arabic. I'm getting placed on guard duty with the Saudi Arabian National Guard, Sane compound. And I'm practicing my Arabic. Lo and behold, this car pulls up. I don't know who it is, so I got my hand on my sidearm, and as this gentleman gets out of the car, everybody snaps to attention, and it's one of the Saudi princes. So I holstered my weapon. So I probably don't want to cause an international incident.
Yeah.
And as he's going down, I jump in line. So I practice on him, and he can't believe it because as he's, kind of shaking hands with every Saudi National Guard person that's there and thanking them, he gets to me. That's at the end of the line. One of these things doesn't look like the other. So I say to him, Salam alaikum. He's like, what? Walaikum salam. I said, what? I said, quiz. I said, kavalach. He said, oh my gosh. He said, quiz. And then, so I had like about 7 things I could say. And it all fell right in line. And he couldn't believe that what he had heard about Americans coming to this foreign country of Saudi Arabia, their country, and he heard about all these kind of things that, whatever we talk about, the abrasive American or whatever he saw, it was totally different than what he had seen. And so we had this conversation for probably about 6 or 7 minutes afterward of asking me all these different questions, from faith background to, he said, are you Muslim? I said, no, I'm Christian. He said, so we just had this beautiful exchange. And I realized in that moment that I, even in a military uniform, am an ambassador for the United States. Even when I was talking to him, understanding that if I come in demanding things, I'm probably not going to catch a lot of positivity back. If I come in trying to understand who you are first, I'm going to have a conversation that opens up. So when he leaves, I can do no wrong with everybody on the Saudi Arabia National Guard. They're inviting me to dinner, to tea, to down into the city. They're taking me everywhere. And we just became great friends, all because getting a little book and trying to learn someone else's language or culture or customs, and not thinking that my custom or learning was the center thing for the rest of the entire world. Everybody has to revolve around me. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us, kind of even going back to the first point we're making with the U.S. Constitution is, what do we do? How do we show up? How do we ensure that we don't think that we're the centerpiece, only being a nation 400 years old or a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about how old that nation is. We're not even, we can't even wipe the snot from our nose yet.
Yeah.
We don't even know if this thing's going to work. So I think we have to honor those and say, yeah, we got a thing going on here. The democracy doesn't work. Can we talk about this and have a really robust dialogue about it without throwing stones and waving, nationalism around, and know that we're a community of the world. We're a community of the world. And so it was a great lesson for me that would set me up later on to build these other programs and knowing how to talk to kind of both sides of the aisle, so to speak.
Well, I think it's fascinating, and I see some undertones in just all the prep work, everything we've done to have this conversation. And right there, what you said with it, just the seeking to understand, versus a lot of times we go into situations, and this one, very high profile situation, but it works as it could be a smaller version of the same situation that we all want to go in and say what we want to say versus how can I understand what's going on right now?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I think it's a fascinating lesson, and I love that you took it away. And so you went overseas, and then what was that like? What did you find yourself doing?
So I wound up, I was a 31 Charlie, which is a single channel radio operator. They've changed the nomenclatures now. And I wound up doing some interesting stuff. I had a buddy of mine, we still talk to this day, Dwayne Burbank, a Native American gentleman. And we were doing combo. He was my net controller back in the U.S. So he was in Fort Huachuca, Arizona. I was stationed in Fort Dix, New Jersey. And so every morning we would talk because we were doing this. If the whole system goes down, all the computers and everything, you got a MARS system, military affiliate radio stations that are around. And so we can still talk through, shortwave or longwave radio. And we got together and we were able to figure out how to do an inverted V. That's take your antennas and point them in a V direction, in the direction which you want them to go. And we were able to get a skip at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the afternoon, all the way across to the United States. So we were doing morale calls home for the soldiers from the radio. We were keyed up 50,000 watts going out, and we were broadcasting to the United States.
That's
I don't know
incredible.
if we wanted to be doing that, finding our location and everything, but
Right. Well, I think it's
we're doing it.
all things in hindsight. We can look back
Yeah,
on
right.
and say, maybe
Probably
it
don't want to
wasn't,
do that.
wasn't the best idea. I'm sure somebody wasn't happy
Yeah,
looking
so
back that
I
we're
did
doing it.
that, and I drove for the commander, and we talked a lot about Captain Baver and I. Excuse me. We talked a lot about officer candidate school. Kind of which way I want to go in the military. So it was really a great experience. But I lost a lot of my track and field ability because you can't run really fast in the sand and train that well.
Yeah.
So I got back to when I did come back after 6 months in the Gulf War. I wound up going to Presidio San Francisco, but I couldn't run the high hurdles any longer. I was just too much, not out of shape, but the fast twitch muscle fibers to run them were just gone. So it takes a long time to build them up. So I switched to the 400-meter hurdles, and after 5 races, qualified for the Olympic trials in the 400-meter hurdles. And in the 6th race, I finished 17th in the Olympic trials. And I said, okay, I got my race. I'm going to do one more 4 years. And that was, I re-enlisted for those 4 years. So I could still have that officer candidate school in my back pocket. Went to Germany, was training over there as well. I was with a different unit. It was great. I became the Czech ride NCOIC of Bitburg, Germany. Was training in Trier and in Kaiserslautern, K-Town. And when I came back in May of 1994, 2 years before the Olympic trials, I misstepped a hurdle during a training run, hyperextended my left knee. I severed the artery behind my kneecap. And 7 days later, because the surgeries didn't work, I wound up having my left leg amputated above the knee. So that was my into my 2 careers. So my track and field career, I was not going to Olympic Games as a one-legger, and my military career. I wasn't going to go to officer candidate school during at that point. So I was I was kind of going down a downward spiral. It wasn't bad, but I knew that, what's life going to be like? And a lot of folks have trauma. They have transitions that they're about to make. Sometimes the transition happens for us, and sometimes we have time to prepare for the transition that comes. And what are we going to do? How do we handle those types of moments? And I was going down that downward spiral, checking my identity. Who am I now? What's my identity? Is my wife still going to stick around? Is my son still going to see me as his father? Do I still have a job in the military? Can I support my family? I mean, all my Olympic dreams are over. And all those things were crushing on me. And I was thinking deeply about them. I had a 4-star General Gordon Sullivan, Chief of Staff of the Army at the time. He was one of my first calls that came in because it was a pretty high-profile injury. Asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him, "Sir, I have no idea. I just, I'm trying to understand what's going on. But I'll tell you what, I'll call you back." So I'm telling this 4-star, this corporal, tell this 4-star, let me get you on my calendar, and I'll call you back. Yeah. So, but that's the state I was in. I wound up doing that. But my wife, she said, we're going to get through this time together. It's just our new normal. When she spoke those words, she made me understand with just those words that life really hadn't changed that much. Still have my family, still had my faculty, still had my degree from the University of Arkansas. I still had dreams, goals, aspirations. The only thing that was different was I was now missing a leg. And so at that moment, I began thinking about how that could I advance? How could I amplify the life I now have? Do I think about the 99% of things that I cannot do? Or do I think about the 1% of things I can't do and the 99% of things I still can do? Mm. So that's the mindset shift that began to happen in me. And I have a whole sequence and a process about that now. But it was at that mindset, that shifting of that got me down the road. And that wasn't even the worst, the hardest part, the amputation. The amputation was just kind of the beginning. The hardest part was on June 17th, 1994. You remember what was happening on that day? I think everybody, when I say this, every audience member, everybody listening to this is going to be like, oh, right. You're going to do the same thing. June 17th, 1994, there was a white Bronco going down the I-5 freeway.
Yeah.
Everybody out there knows what that
Yep.
means, right?
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
No one knows what's happening. We got OJ in the back, and I am sitting on my cousin's couch in San Antonio, Texas. The phantom pain that is crushing me right now. It's the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. I can't get any rest. I can't turn to left or right, stand up, sit down. I'm sweating profusely. My heart rate's at about 115, 120 beats a minute. And I just cannot get any relief. And there was a note that was being read by like every commentator that afternoon, every news reporter. And it looked like the note that was found by O.J. Simpson was a suicide note. Forget this shell of a man. Don't think of this person here. Remember the good old days of O.J. or whatever. All that stuff that he had written in that note looked like the juice was about to check out. And I made up my mind at that moment. I said, no matter how bad this gets, I will never check out. I will never check out. And for those vets that are out there right now that might be even thinking about that because you don't think that your life is worth it, you are valuable. You are created unique. You are the only one that can do what you do. No one else is designed to do it but you. And you have to stay with. You got to fight through. Whatever the support is that you need, find it. Come up and reach out and connect because we got you, brothers. We got you, sisters. We got you. We need your voice, and I'm going to share why. You'll see from my life in this point of, if you can take anything from this life, I went on to do some pretty incredible things after making that decision. And if I would have stopped it there, maybe we don't get all these other programs that have happened. And you're the only voice that's out there that can actually make it happen. So that's my plug for it. Hey, we got to take care of each other. We got to take care of each other.
Well,
so that was it. That was my embarkation. The jumping off point was that moment of watching OJ and saying, I'm going to go through. And I knew it was going to get worse, Fab, before it got better. I knew it. But I said, I'm willing to go through that fight. I'm going to go through that fight. And it did. It got hecka worse.
What was it in that moment that, obviously there's a lot going on, his note that was left. What was it that made you just click? Like, no matter what, I'm not checking out.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was just understanding that this was, I call it my night in Gethsemane. It was just I was there alone. No one was around me. And this was just me. I had to, are you going to fight through this? You know, you've been through some tough stuff before, but this one's going to take you to the brink. And if you can get through this, think about all of the lives that you can help because of your one commitment to this moment in time, this defining moment. I think we all get them at points. And do we rise to that occasion? Because if we get through that point, we can help others release from their points to do what they're called to do. It doesn't have to be necessarily my thing, but whatever they're called to do, it helps them get through that point to discover, uncover, push into the space that they are designed to impact.
And you mentioned something a few steps prior to that and a few pieces prior to that I wanted to circle back to, because as we tie into veterans and just what you had said in that moment, am I going to focus on the 99% of things I can't do or the 99% of things that I can do? I mean, just bringing it up when, as you mentioned, veterans too, I often wonder how many people are so hyper-focused on what they feel like they can't do right now. Why is it so important to shift that mindset, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, when I studied a little bit later on in life, Dr. Martin Seligman's work, he talks about learned helplessness. And so, I'm not going to go into all the studies and stuff, but we teach ourselves to be helpless. And even though there are escapes, we choose to stay in the danger zone. We tend to stay in the negative space. So we have to flip that mindset to a couple more areas. The first one is learned optimism. So I can have a helpless statement, but I need to turn that helpless statement into an optimistic statement. So I begin to see what are the things that are around me that can support me and push me to an optimistic level to see a better end for myself than this negative end. Because if I can think about a helpless state, I can think about an optimistic state as well. Because they're both future states. Neither one has happened. So I can choose which path I want to be on. We just think that we have to go down this negative one.
Mm.
And then after we get to the learned optimism, now we can take ownership of it. So now I can make an owner statement. I will show up as. And that begins the affirmations that we can make in our lives that will advance us away from that negative mindset. So there are tactics around this. Make a list of all the negative things that you think are negative. Make a list of all the positive things you think are positive. Tear the list up. Divide it in half, and then crumple up or burn up the negative stuff, so you only have the positive stuff left. There are lots of things that we can do as tactical, but we have to make up in our mind that we're not going to listen to that negative voice. It's too easy. I'm having my own podcast coming out, right? It's Amputate to Amplify, and the Amputate to Amplify podcast, and we're just getting some things started right now. But the question I ask is to every guest is, you're writing a book entitled "How to Destroy." That's a lot. It's directed at meeting planners and stuff. How do you destroy the perfect meeting? Right. So it's a sabotage, because no one comes up how to save a meeting. No one gives you that. But if I ask you how to sabotage a meeting, how not to sabotage one, you think about all the stories of sabotage of running screwing up a meeting. And there's a story that goes behind that. So that's, we always think about the negative. And then can we bring it back to the positive? So we go from the learned helplessness to the optimistic to the owner mindset.
I really love that. And just for anybody listening as well, I don't know when can we expect your podcast? Because I know I'm going to jump in and check it out. When do you think that would launch out?
So I have, we're batching them, so we got the URL and everything, but we're batching them. And when I get about 6, I'm going to launch. So it looks like middle of February sometime will be that, maybe early March. But yeah, we're starting to get the shows tight together. They're hilarious. I mean, because you can imagine they just go.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
because they just tell me the story of what was how they would sabotage it because they saw someone else sabotage that direct way. I'm like, what? Really? They did what? So it's fun conversations.
Well, and I'll be sure to link the podcast once it goes. I'll put it in the bio and we can get it linked up so anybody listening can go check yours out as well. And I love that exercise. It's something I do often with people because a lot of times we struggle what to do. But I just don't know what to do here. Like, well, let's talk about all the things that would be the opposite of what you end result you want. And then all of a sudden they have this big list. I was like, well, let's just do the opposite of everything you just put down.
Yeah.
And it's a cool little bridge and pathway to get to that good stuff.
Absolutely.
And the learned optimism, I think, is a really important thing. And I don't know, do you spend a lot of time talking about optimism and positive thinking, things like that?
No, not really.
Okay.
Because it's really not my work.
Mm-hmm.
I see similarities with the concepts, and I haven't studied Dr. Silliman, so I'm probably not as much as I probably should have. I've studied him a little bit in his on positive psychology, but not to the depths of like a PhD level. What I with a lot of those frameworks, there's a destination that happens, and my focus, my thought is that there really is not a destination. There are plateaus that we can reach, but there's from that plateau, some people might call it growth mindset. I say the plateau is for our next level of growth. So we hit a plateau in order to grow. Because in my model, I have 3 phases, and I can jump into it now if you want me.
Yeah.
I have what's called the reckoning moment. The reckoning moment is realized or hurdled when we realize we do not get back what we desire to have back after some type of trauma has impacted our life. So that's the reckoning moment. the next one, that's when we realize that we can't go back. People will say this, and we can hear it in people's voices or what they say. I wish things would get back to normal. Can't we just go back to the way it used to be? If we could just get back to the old days, it's gonna be. But the old days were never that great. They were just older days. So, but anytime we hear that, we know somebody's in a loop of the past or a loop of trying to get back to a nostalgia or something. Yeah, if we can just go back to the way it used to be, if we can just go back to the time of the 1980s, it'd be great. If we can just get back to before that we had 1970, we can't go back. And that's an impossibility. It's just impossible. So once we understand and realize that, we now have hurdled into the revision. I can now begin to have a new casted vision. And that new vision begins with a redefining the problem, then a rebuilding on that. We start tinkering around with it. In other words, we don't have anything constructed, but we're starting to erect, maybe dig the hole for the building to be erected. And then we have to make a commitment to the new vision. That's hard. It's the second hardest part of the model. And the reason it's so hard is because we have usually people who are very close to us, what I call other people, these other very close people, who believe for us what we can or cannot do, which is often based upon what they believe they could or could not do if they were in our situation. So a doctor might tell me, you'll never run again. Because I've never been an amputee before, and I assume that this doctor is the authority because she's done multiple amputations. They are the authority in my life that tells me I will never be able to do this. And I trust that authority figure. So therefore I believe them because I know no other basis or grounds. And they become that authority figure in my life to tell me I can't do it. So therefore I think and I assimilate that into me. Very difficult. A mom or dad, you're not going to amount to anything. You're just like your mother. You're just like your father. Right? And we internalize those things because as kids, we esteem our parents to be the closest things to us, the closest people. And so if I hear that constantly, I'm never going to amount to anything from the person that is my confidant, the one that I'm the closest to. I struggle. The second thing is we have society. Society dictates to us our normalities. The antagonist in Peter Pan is Captain Hook. He's scaring the Lost Boys. He's the antagonist because he's an above the wrist amputee. He wears a hook. Hook represents I have a claw that's going to hurt you if I put this into. I can hook you like I hook a fish, like I hook something that I'm going to spear you. And so he's made the villain, this disfigured person, cartoon character. But wait a minute, I'm now an amputee. And I begin to associate things around every Halloween. I see people with disfigurements. I see people that have maybe amputees or Freddy Kruegers. They're burned over their bodies. I see Jason, who's mentally kind of deranged. And so now society has told me that these people are to be feared. Hannibal Lecter, Clarice, right? All these people are to be feared. Now we want to have a mental health conversation, and we can't. Because we've been told that is wrong. That's who we blame everything on in society. For all of our ills, all of our woes, all the things that we don't want to take responsibility for ourselves, we just say, big mass school shooting happens. Oh, they were mentally ill. We just blame everything. Instead of taking ownership of what we need to take ownership of, we cast it out. Very difficult to move past those two. And now, the third piece is I have to do it. I've had some of the world's best hurdle coaches in the world. They never ran a hurdle for me. I have to be the one to attack the hurdles in my life. No one else can do that for me. So I'm either going to attack it or I'm going to stop at it or I'm going to go around it. But you got to attack the hurdle. So maybe you start off with small hurdles, small wins, and you begin to raise them up. That's how we teach the hurdles. So it's very difficult. That gets us. So once we hurdle that, now we're in the third part, which is great because now we're in the renewal, and we want to be in the renewal. But it begins with the hardest part of the model, and that's the rebirth. Once I make a commitment, there is now a chasm that has been created with a commitment. There is no going back to the way it used to be. It is an impossibility. If you can go back on your commitment, I say that you have not made a commitment. You're probably in the reckoning moment and not the rebirth. That's the difference between the two. When a commitment is made, when I tell the doctor, take my leg off, and the doctor amputates my leg, I do not get my leg back. When we make commitments, we do not get back what we had prior to. We don't want to hear those things. It's very difficult to hear those things. I can go back on my commitment. No, you can't. You never made a commitment in the first place if you can. Because a commitment is a commitment. It's like the old joke, right? When you have your breakfast, bacon and eggs, the chicken was involved in the process. The pig was committed.
I've never heard that, and I'm going to steal that.
You get more eggs from that chicken, but you can't get any more bacon from that pig. You got to get another pig, baby.
Man, so inside of that too. Where do you think people? I think you alluded to it. Where do you think people struggle the most inside of this process?
I think it depends wherever they are.
Okay.
Because I think when you see yourself, you can see yourself where you are in the model.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so here's what happens. I'll finish the model out. And so in the rebirth, there's a couple things that have to happen. One, you might have phantom pain, like I had that huge phantom pain, to remind you of a previous state that you were in, but you're no longer there because you made the commitment. You may have a longing for, in my case, my mother who passed away 2 years ago, to see mom again, to talk to mom. It's not happening. That pains me. That is a visceral reactive response. I'm not getting it back because the commitment is already done. She is passed from this life, right? So I cannot get it back. It could be you want to go back in the military, but you have exited and you no longer are able to get back into your unit or get back into the military. You have exited and now you're in this whole new world. So how do we respond in that? For me, I didn't know how to use a wheelchair, but now I have to use one to get to my prosthetic appointment. That's new. Because new is no prior point of reference. Mm-hmm. And when new is no prior point of reference, if that's the definition, then we can't use old systems, old thoughts, old ideas to put into a new bucket to get a different output. If we do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, it's the definition of what?
Insanity.
Absolutely. Yeah. So why do we do it? So then I have to learn to manipulate that wheelchair. I have to learn how to put on an artificial leg. I have to learn how to walk between the parallel bars. I have to learn how to walk on a 4-bar walker around the hospital. I have to learn how to use a walker to crutches to a cane to free walking to running to jumping to a Paralympic silver medal. That process took 7 years. Can I shorten the time? Can I shorten it by getting through those other phases faster? By honoring that I need to get out of this reckoning moment. I need to jump past this the revision and start working. So I have to in the renewal. So I have to have this give myself space and grace to grow. I need to give myself space and grace to grow. Because when something is new, you just can't start running if you're a toddler. You can't start toddling if you don't even know how to walk. You're learning. You got to learn these things again. Mm-hmm. And so that is the space and grace we need. Once we have done that, and now I'm walking well, and I'm up on 2 limbs again, walking around. That's my resolve. I'm resolute in who I am. I know exactly how I'm showing up. No longer do I ever want to go back to the way it used to be. No, you need to catch up to where I am. That's not braggadocio. You just done the work. You've read the Constitution.
Yeah.
You know what the preamble is. You know the 7 articles. You know why article number 5 is the most important article, right? trying to pull that back.
Yeah, no, I love it that you do.
So we know we don't have to have CNN or Fox tell me what it is. We don't have to have a talking head tell me what to think. No, because I've read it. I know exactly what it says, and I can begin to my own interpretations off of it of what I think the founders desired for that, right? For that document. So now that equals my freedom, my destination, my reward, so to speak. But the reward, remember, is not a destination; it's a plateau for the next level of growth. And that's where my model, I think, changes from some of the other models. Like I said, I haven't studied them all together, so maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen them go. I think they've been destination type models, where mine is, no, we hit here and then we elevate to the next level. We've learned something. It's not even elevation up, right? Elevation usually is up. I think it's elevation is when you turn it on its side, and I jump from like maybe a lily pad to a lily pad or a stone to a stone, because I honor the place where I was, and then I move to the next stone. I gather myself when I land on that stone in order to jump to the next stone. So I can't move to stone 2 unless I honor stone number 1. I don't climb over stone number 1. You know, I think if I go up a ladder, I'm climbing over somebody. You got to climb the corporate ladder. What if the corporate ladder was rungs, like over a chasm, to help other people across the chasm of commitment?
And there's something that I read his book. The book's called With Winning in Mind. And it's a bit of an older book. I don't know if it's a little bit dated, but he was an Olympian back in the day. He had this goal his whole life to be a gold medalist in precision shooting. And he said the most depressed day of his life was the day after he won his gold medal. And it was because, and his wife told him, she's like, well, you've had this goal your entire life. Like, of course you're depressed because you don't know what's next. You've always had a goal. And that's what I love about where you're stating this, is honoring that we're going from this lily pad to this lily pad, or this stone to this stone, and knowing that we're going to the next stone. But we got to honor where we're at. And I think far too often, to his point and to what I'm hearing and your point, is that if we don't know where we're going next, it's easy to kind of really focus in on what we don't have. Back to, you had talked about earlier, that 99% of what we can't do right now, it keeps us hyper focused in. Whereas when we know what that next is, it's great.
Right. And, sometimes I think we know and sometimes we don't know, but I think we know that changes in the air, right? So I think about, let me see, maybe like Jim Brown. Maybe some folks remember Jim Brown, great running back, right? But he stops before the height of his career, and he does something else. And then we look at maybe a Brett Favre or Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, can't give the game up. Have to stay in. We'll switch teams to stay going on, to play, because I don't know if they're afraid of, but when I listen to them talk, they're missing the 4 people on the court with Jordan, or the 10 other people on the court on the field going down the football field. That's what they're going to miss the most. And they want to stay part of that element. Same thing with a soldier. Same thing with a military, like a commander. They're leading all these people. Now, who are they going to lead when they get back to the house and they have just in time their service, ETS?
Yeah.
Their family that they were never there for because they were always on missions. Somebody else was leading that household.
And that's
in garrison.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And recognizing that, and it made me think of something as well, because you had talked about with the staying in, and then I love how you brought it back, like with all these greats that have stayed on their team and then moved teams. But thinking about the military in general, that was one of the reasons I remember talking to some buddies that we always said, if we could stay together for 20 years, it'd probably be a different conversation. But we know immediately if we all re-enlisted, we're all going to end up in different spots. And so I don't ever look back and think about what if, simply because I know that it wasn't going to be what it was. It couldn't be. It was going to shift. It was going to change.
And I don't mean this, Thad, I don't mean to make light of. I'm being very serious, right? These are very hard, difficult challenges that people, and it doesn't escape anybody is what I'm really trying to say. So then how do we prepare for it? And that's where I really come in. That's my work that I do now. So you heard I went on from, the military to becoming this Paralympic athlete. I swam for physical therapy. And I fluked up, messed up, and made the Paralympic swim team like in 90. So instead of going as a 400-meter hurdler, I went as a Paralympic swimmer. And then I saw athletes running and jumping with artificial legs. Had a leg made for running, and 4 years later, I went to Sydney, Australia, and won silver medal in the long jump. And then, I was working for the military. And I started working for the Olympic Committee, and that's when the Gulf War turned into the new Iraq War. Gulf War 2.0, what do you want to call it?
Mm-hmm.
And the first casualties were first starting to come back from that conflict, that war, and Walter Reed was being overrun with people that were primarily amputees at that point. They were getting maimed and stuff, and so we had a different war on our hands than what was the last one. A general officer got fired because trying to do the right thing, and we hadn't prepared, so he got the axe. And I had this new program. I was asked by my boss, what can we do for our veterans from the Olympic Committee? Because I had I had all the KIAs on my door. I was getting reports. I still had my Pentagon account, and I would post the names of the KIAs that were coming up. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And so we started a wheelchair basketball clinic at Walter Reed. That turned into a program at Walter Reed and then Brooke Army Medical Center. I got some money, some funding for it from a senator, a congressman out of Pennsylvania, and he gave me $5 million. I got $10 million from Representative Filner out of Chula Vista, California, for the VA side, and that really began what became known as the Paralympic Military Sport Program. So all these things that we're talking about right here, right? The planning for the transition begins to open up other opportunities that you may have never seen coming. And so what we should do is we should always plan for our transitions. The great April Holmes, Paralympic athlete, she says, train for your transition. We do all these training for operations, train for the transition. It's a part of your duty is to train for your transition. Look at your options before you need to get to your options. And I think that's always preparing for the next thing is, even when I went full-time as a professional speaker now, I trained for that before the United States Olympic Committee decided to right-size me, upsize me, switch me out to something different because the mission changes, right? And so I was prepared for that, to go out as a full-time speaker. Because in my basement from 6 o'clock in the evening to about 10 o'clock at night, I worked on it. I worked on the business to see where this thing could take. And then when I was going to leave in February of 2019, and they let me go in 2019, January 4th, 12:30, 34 seconds. It was great. I had 15 years, with the organization. I learned a ton. I had my stone that I was on. I learned a lot from them. So I'm not bitter about that. It was just time to move. I had a different vision, and now I could step to the next stone on a secure stone because I had built it. Instead of being, I do an exercise with everybody has a rope and everybody holds onto the rope, and it's interesting to see. I say, okay, we're balanced on the rope, so our feet have to be inside the rope, and I tell a couple people to let go of the rope because they're gonna move to a different job or move to a different thing. And so some people they let the rope go really quickly, so everybody has to scramble trying to balance themselves out on the rope. Some people let the rope go very gently to allow other people time to fill in the balance on the rope. So what type of leader are you? What type of way do you leave an organization? Do you just drop the rope? Or do you really try to replace the person that you have coming in so that there's a lot less friction on the organization when it's time for to sunset what you're going to do for that organization.
As I wrap my head around, I love just the idea, the concept of it with grabbing of the rope, and I can totally see people just dropping it and just peacing out. I'm done.
I'm out.
Yeah, I'm done. Which is very representative of a lot of things.
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier, and I was hoping to touch back on it as well, because
Sure.
I know now we're back into 2019, but fast forward all the way back to 94, because you had said something, and it's easy to see, and I say easy to see in hindsight, because you've spelled it out so masterfully, of just all these lessons that you've learned. But in that moment in time that you said that you had your leg amputated, that you had thought, it's over. What's my life like now? And I don't think you could have ever known that, when you just say it's over, and then now you're, a silver medalist. So it clearly wasn't over. Maybe the vision was different. But what was that like for you in that moment? I mean, committing to something different. I mean, what helped you in that moment? Because I think a lot of times we go find ourselves in that moment unsure of what to do.
Well, mine's a very easy answer, because I alluded to earlier. I'm a person of faith, and when I say faith, I mean Christianity. When I say Christianity, I mean Christ. So I look at life through and not even what the most people think probably in Christianity. So let me unpack that just a little bit.
Yeah.
So when I was going through a business leadership class for veterans, run out of Syracuse University. I was doing it at Oklahoma State University, a week-long intensive certification course for entrepreneurship. We had a woman that came in. Her name is Pat Enriquez. And Pat said to us, "What's the most important thing for your business?" And we all got the answer wrong. So she's like a little bitty drill sergeant, man. She was like, she's built like millions of dollars of organizations and contracts and stuff. She says, the most important thing in your business is not your clients. It's not your marketing. It's not your whatever you want to put in there, your supply chain. The most important thing in business is, how are you going to wrap up your business? And I said, oh my gosh, what a brilliant way to think of it. Because when you begin with that question, how am I going to wrap the business up? Am I going to put it on the stock market? Am I going to give it to my children? Am I going to train up somebody else to take it? Do I just want to sunset the entire thing? It puts you in the state of saying that my business is so successful that I have something to wrap up. And I was like, dang, that's brilliant. So then it was still bugging me, right? 6 months later. And I realized the question that I was really asking myself was, how are you going to wrap up the end of your life when it's all said and done, back to dust? How are you going to wrap it up? And my answer was, I wanted my God to say, well done, good and faithful servant. That's what I want. That's what I want to hear. And so how do I do that? I have to seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all things shall be added to me. So how do I do that? I have to be very cautious on the foundation that I build. So when I say the foundation I believe is Christ, and so we can build in 6 different ways. We can build with wood, hay, and stubble, or gold, silver, and precious stones, because every person's work gets tried by fire. And if I build with wood, hay, and stubble, and my work's tried by fire, it's a fire sale. I smell like smoke. But my foundation is still there. If I build with gold, silver, and precious stones, my work lasts. It's purified. Fire purifies those things. So I have a tag or a place in my speech where I talk about that we have to breathe oxygen into our atmosphere to survive and thrive in our environments. And that's how I kind of look at things, right? If I have oxygen leaving my environment, say I'm underwater and I can't get back to the surface, you're a Marine, what do you do? What do you do? You're about to, you can't make it to the top. What's the response in the brain that begins to do? It begins with a P.
Panic.
I panic. When I panic, I might start doing irrational things. Right? So if you think back to the beginning of the pandemic, How do we know that America was in a panic situation? What was the one thing we were doing that told the rest of the world we were panicking? Remember?
I mean, I'm thinking about all the masks everybody was buying, all this stuff everybody's
We
buying.
weren't even buying masks at that time. We were buying toilet paper.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Man, I forgot about that.
We were fighting over toilet paper.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That's not rational. Because that was not going to solve COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We didn't even know what we were dealing with at that point, but we're buying toilet paper. So we do irrational things. And so when we are adding oxygen into environment, oxygen becomes rich. It becomes a sustainer, it becomes a life giver, and it helps other people have other life. When we take oxygen away, we cause panic and stress. So the question wasn't even about, going back to the pandemic, the question wasn't about whether somebody wanted to wear a mask or not wear a mask. The question wasn't about whether somebody wanted a vaccination or not have a vaccination. The question was, excuse me, when someone came to you, John Register, with the opposing idea that you had, did you add oxygen, John, into their environment? Or did you, John, take it away? Because that's on me. That's not on a political party. That's not on left versus right. That's on what did I do in that moment? What am I responsible for another life that is here, that has a unique design and a capability of only doing one thing in this earth that life is designed to do? So that's how I look at my life right now. Can I add oxygen into people's environment all the time? Life was given to me. I have to push life into others. If I'm causing panic in someone's life, I got to check myself, because I'm not designed to do that. I'm not designed to take life away. And that's on me. I can't blame anyone else, but if I do it or not do it. So that's how I show up. That's what I talk about in my faith. I am designed to do this. And so I do it now through the lens or through the platform of keynote speaking. I do it through the platform of leading conversations for CEOs and executives. I do it through a platform of having fireside chats and taking that contextual model that I just said and sharing it with those that are doing mergers and acquisitions, some very challenging times for people and their employees to move one organization to another, or when someone's going through a reorganization in their business, or they're trying to get people on board to go through a new time or concept. How do we add life during that entire process to make the organization not just survive, but thrive in it? So I hope that answered that question. It was a long and winded answer,
right,
but I'm a storyteller, so that's what you get.
Beautiful. I love that. I was thinking it made me ponder and just think about where I'm adding oxygen in other people's lives and in general, whether it's in passing, if I'm, I think even on a basic level, which you were in a very high, beautiful space with that. And just in everyday passing, are you causing panic in others? If somebody's got a good idea, are you sampling it out? Are you adding oxygen? Right. I just love it. It's a great way to look at it. That can be applied to a lot of things.
So yeah, that's what I share with audiences, and it's a self-discovery journey. I mean, I'm giving the recipe out here on your show, Thad, but
yeah,
it's really the conversation it's a very fun presentation. We do a lot of activity, a lot of exercise. I believe in experiential learning, so I'm always trying to do some type of activity to lock the learning in. And sometimes we do Paralympic sports that are easy to do inside of a room, and sometimes we do a stand-up, turnaround. All these things that lock the learning in for the individual to be a better team player for whatever organization that they're with.
I think it's absolutely it's fascinating. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all of this stuff. You got a beautiful story and an amazing journey. So I'm very happy that you jumped on and shared it all.
Absolutely.
I'd love to ask you one more question, as well as to just share before we close it out with that, where's the best place for somebody listening that said, you know what, I love John's message. I want to hear more. Where can they find you? Aside from obviously your new podcast that's coming out as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Yeah. So the best place really is my website. It's johnregister.com, johnregister.com. All my social media handles are up there on the upper right-hand corner. Everything's easy to toggle to. I have a business phone, that number that's up there, and I think my email is there too, so you can get with me or get my assistant. If you're looking for someone to come in, work with your teams or your employees, CEOs, executives, coaching on that. And then we have a little newsletter that goes out. It really came from a lot of people that were following me after my presentations. And so I try to get this community together. I started something called JR's 90-day sprints. Excuse me. These 90-day sprints are designed to take one aspect of leadership for 90 days and drill deep into it by conversations I've had with other people on various podcasts or other platforms. And we take a little snippet of what they have shared and their methodology of how they shared it, and we share it with anybody that signs up for that. And it goes out once a week on Sunday, and we have a conversation once a month, or definitely once a quarter, with myself. And you can ask any questions, kind of ask JR anything, and that has to deal with any one of the modules that we have been through. And it's just a good place to get a community together. It's not on Facebook. It's on Mighty Network, so it's behind it's kind of own the people inside of that area, so people can have a good dialogue with each other without having the algorithms being changed on you. So it's a nice, it's a good space just to be involved with.
I'm definitely going to throw that into the bio and of the podcast for anybody listening. That way, make it easy access to click and to go find you and hopefully to join the conversation.
Absolutely, thank you.
And knowing that you've talked to tons of people just throughout your journey, you've helped out tons of people. I'm curious to ask you, where do you see people get, I don't know if hung up's the right word, or just unsure? Like, what do you see as the catalyst for them? Is there a common thread that somebody might be able to take something away from, that this was it, and this is how I was able to get through my problem or my struggle that I was having?
Yeah, I think the common thread is making this understanding that self identification moment that you are stuck, right? And I think people think that they're not stuck when they actually are stuck. I have to recognize very quickly, oh, you know what? I am trying to do every single thing, but I haven't gone back to the basics, right? Let's take it from a sales point, right? Why don't I have any events coming up in February? Well, idiot, because in November you stopped making sales calls. Yeah. Oh, I got to back to something, right? So we have the answers that are there for us, but do we want to see them? And I think we get blindsided by our own, success or our own belief in ourselves, or something. We just don't see it. And so it's very important, to get with a mastermind group or get with and I don't do a mastermind. So I'm in a mastermind group, but I don't do masterminds like that, like paper mastermind group. When I look at masterminds, I'm talking about, you start with two people, and then two people must agree on the third person to come into the mastermind. But they're really there to help you advance forward, to see your blind spots, because we all have them. We all have blind spots. And so we're there to help each other through those times. So you got to get yourself with a group of people that will not allow you to fail. And sometimes not allowing to fail means you got to have some tough conversations. And you make some great choices from that, because you have other people in your wheelhouse. And I think that's how we get past it. Those are some of the action steps that we kind of get stuck.
Okay. I love it got me laughing simply because it's so obvious and true, but just recognizing that you are stuck. And then we do the things we need to do to get unstuck.
Right.
But the start of it is just saying, you know what? Seems like I'm stuck. And I'm stuck. Yeah. I'm stuck. but we don't do any other stuff until we realize we're stuck. Because if I don't know I'm stuck, I'm not going to reach out. I'm not going to get advice from others. So I think it's a great point.
You remember the old standard cars where you had to shift the car into first, and then you had to shift in reverse, and you got to clutch it.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever lived in like Chicago, where I'm at right now, I'm not living in Chicago, but I'm back in Chicago. You might have gotten yourself in a rut, and you had to rock that car back and forth. And some people just keep on going. They don't realize they need a tow truck. or something else to throw them a lifeline and pull them out of the rut, because they've dug themselves in so deep that they're not getting out, just not getting out. And so we have to realize before we start going back and forth and shifting the gears, we might need to call a truck just to get us back on the road.
Absolutely. And then that tow truck and that example with just that mastermind group, or having somebody else that can let you know your blind spot. So, John, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking some time. You have just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, and I really appreciate you taking the space and the time.
Absolutely. Can I throw one more thing in there?
Please.
Yep. So I do have I wrote a book for our ambassadors. It's out now. It's called 10 Power Stories to Impact Any Leader. Journal Your Way to Leadership Success. It's not on Amazon. It's not out there on the big thing. I did it, just down and dirty. I got it out to them because it was at the beginning of the pandemic, and they were getting kicked out of countries. And if you remember, very early on, we didn't know if the pandemic was coming to the United States or what was going to be happening. And at the same time, they were being kicked out of countries and couldn't make their way through other countries because those countries had shut down too. So we couldn't get our expats back home. So the question was not policy. The question was, how do you lead in that type of environment? And so you must lead with story. So I wrote a book called 10 Power Stories to Impact Any Leader, Journal Your Way to Leadership Success. The goal of that book is, once you read through the stories, my 10 stories, you then are invited to write your own stories after each one of those stories. So at the end of the book, you have your own 10 stories that you can lead in some type of a crisis environment. So that's the goal of the book. And now it's in paperback form. So you can get it. And it's on the website as well, on the shopping cart.
Excellent. I'm excited to go check that out as well. That's very intriguing. I love that format.
It's a bathroom reader, man. It's definitely.
Well, I feel like there's a Marine Corps joke in there about why it has to be easy for me to get through. But man, thank you, John. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Thad.
1 million veterans. Empowering 1 million veterans is my mission. My name is Thad David. And if you like this mission or this podcast, there's a few things you could do to help me out. And number one is just leave a 5-star review and let the world know that you enjoyed this show. Number 2, follow or subscribe the show wherever you're watching. And number 3, share it with as many people as you think would find value in it. Now, if you have direct feedback for me, or if there's anything that I can do to personally help you out, please reach out to me directly at victoriousveteranproject@gmail.com. I truly look forward to hearing from you. Conquer today.